Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I thought I was turning the volume down there. Turns out I was actually skipping the song. I'm your host, as always, Kane Sims, and today we're going to have an immense conversation because our guest today, Raj Tumuluri, is literally one of the industry's most experienced practitioners and business leaders in this field of conversational AI. His record speaks for itself, and I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. He is the CEO of OpenStreamai, recently crowned in the visionary quadrant of the Gartner Magic Hype Cycle, Magic Quadrant rather. The only company actually in the visionary quadrant, and so I'm really excited to see just what is so visionarily about OpenStream. So I'm really excited for that conversation. But before we welcome Raj, I'd like to give a shout out to Deepgram and Symbl.ai for presenting and sponsoring this episode of VUX World. You'll have learned a lot more about Deepgram if you attended our webinar, which we did a couple of weeks back, not last week. In fact, it was last week. And we dove really deep into what it takes to build a truly conversational AI. We might touch on some of that stuff as well today when we speak to Raj. Deepgram is industry-leading speech recognition. And crucially, as you start to develop your maturity and you start to deploy more sophisticated solutions, you will absolutely be trying to squeeze every ounce of accuracy out of all of your AI models and ML models, and retraining or being able to retrain your speech recognition system is crucial to feeding accurate data into your NLU. And Deepgram is literally one of the best in the market at being able to offer you those kind of capabilities. If you want to learn more about how to implement industry-leading speech recognition into your voice AI capabilities, then please do go to deepgram.com/VUX World. And Symbl.ai is a conversational intelligence platform, a suite of APIs that enables you to build almost anything that you can imagine, from being able to extract data within conversations that you didn't even know existed. And so, for example, you can build things like agent assist capabilities where you can have an AI assistant sitting, listening to calls, listening to the user, listening to the agent, and being able to suggest next best actions and stuff like that. You can use it for doing things like meeting notes, summaries, summarization, topic summarization, speaker identification, and a whole bunch more. It's really, really impressive. So check out Symbl.ai if you want to learn more about that. That's SYMBL.ai to learn more. And that's kind of about it. And thank you for Symbl and Deepgram for sponsoring this episode. And without further ado, please, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome Raj Tumuluri, who is the CEO of OpenStreamai. Raj, welcome to
Thanks.
VUX World. There we go. Where are you?
Thanks.
There you are.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I know that it is your end of year today, and so such a busy afternoon ahead. So thank you for spending some time, spend some time joining us.
Yep.
No worries. So first of all, congratulations on the Gartner Magic Quadrant positioning. It was the kind of Magic Quadrant was, almost, well, everyone in the industry knew it was coming, but no one really knew exactly who was going to be in there. And so when it came out, it was a really interesting read. And OpenStream, the sole proprietor of that visionary position, which I think was quite unique. So I'm really keen to learn more about OpenStream and what it is and what makes it so visionary and so different. But you yourself are really kind of like, we're in the presence of some kind of like speech recognition royalty here, because your kind of background and experience is absolutely unbelievable. So I'm wondering whether you might be able to just share a little bit about yourself with our audience, and share a little bit about your experience and your kind of journey up to OpenStream.
Well, thank you so much. I would keep it brief. Obviously, I started in the speech recognition technology some 25 years back, and literally worked with every possible speech vendor that is out there, and went through nuance acquiring each one of them. Finally, that getting acquired by Microsoft now. And of course, more than myself, and I surround myself with people that are much smarter than me. Our chief scientist, a shout out to him, Dr. Phil Cohen, is one of the pioneers in the space. And he at SRI was the one that originally wrote an open agent architecture that most of the virtual assistants of today are based on that. And since you spoke about in one of your previous episodes about Adam Shire was an intern under Professor Cohen at SRI.
Wow.
And so that has the foundation of the Siri right there. And so the team of research scientists that we have are all like pioneers in the space in terms of dialogue engine and other things. And we do things slightly differently from most other companies because we've been at it for long. So anyway, that's all experiential learning, and we can discuss that. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, one of the things that caught my eye, I mean, you mentioned as we before we kind of started this show, you kind of referenced a couple of episodes that we've done in the past, which was with Chandra Khatri from Got It AI, and some of the ones that we've been looking at, which has been really kind of exploring those emerging technologies that are, startups that are, building, I suppose, a slightly different approach to NLU capabilities. And what the trend I've noticed from talking to those kind of companies, like Got It AI, like Zero Shot Bot, like Vlooper, CCAR Technologies, a bunch of companies like that, is that they all have this academic background. They all come out of academia where they study how natural language understanding could potentially work, prove out a theory, and build something on top of it. And what's really interesting about OpenStream is that when you look at most of the conversational AI providers out there, a lot of them are, I would say, kind of like front ends to what you say more like traditional kind of NLUs, which is not a criticism because I think that the requirement for democratizing it is absolutely needed. Yeah, but OpenStream is fairly unique because you do have a very deep academic background, which must lead itself then into creating some slightly different technology. So I wonder if you can first of all shed a bit of a light on the kind of such a focus on the kind of academic side of things and how that approach has led to what is different about OpenStream.
Yeah, that's actually a good question because you can't be developing things that are basically rooted in deep AI technologies without really working with academia and being in the academics for a long time. So some of my colleagues are still publishing, and so we actually have been working on this technology for a while. But both in terms of research, in academic research, and as well as standardization of this. I was actually myself at the W3C multimodal interaction working group. I co-wrote the standard for my MMI architecture. So basically, we have got a good mix of both the research backing and as well as the foundations in standardization and interoperability. So that puts us in a unique position that we are not trying to build some GUI tool as a front end to some other models that are, logistic regression models that are available on the cloud. So we would rather, so therefore we are focusing on the real conversational as opposed to an if then else code. That probably there, I mean, I'm again not criticizing those things because they are also needed. It's simple enough for certain use cases, and they might as well do that. But for anything meaningful that you want to do with complex use cases that some of our largest enterprise clients have, you need to really have core technology in place, both from the knowledge representation, knowledge extraction, and also basically having the speech recognition and also basically dialogue processing. So that is where we try to infer the plans of the user when they ask a question rather than literally looking at the meaning of whatever they asked, and trying to provide an answer. The case in point, if I'm asking, are there any Indian restaurants nearby? My intent is not to merely know, yes, there are, or no, there aren't. My plan probably would be to go there after this and have some lunch. So in which case, I expect a real assistant of mine would have just told me that, Raj, there are 3 restaurants. The closest one, doesn't have any tables available, reservations available. The next one is about 20 minutes away. Shall I get you directions for that? They'll take walk-ins. So that would be the real assistance. We are just focusing on the assistant part of the virtual assistant or intelligent assistant, because are we just a Q&A system that just answering a question with a literal answer, or are you trying to infer the plans of the user and trying to be helpful? Obviously, no matter what system you build, people out there can make any system fail. We all learned that, right? So, but then, the 90% of the users are not really looking at, trying to be wise with your system, trying to break your system and do things like that. We have seen lots of jokes about, Viv or Siri, but that's all like, at the surface level, it's for fun. But other than that, there are pretty decent things that you can accomplish in terms of productivity gains and then operational cost reduction and things like that you can achieve. And those are things that are possible when you focus on assisting the users as opposed to just answering the questions. So that is what we focus on, we call it as plan-based dialogue engine. So which is unique kind of, across the industry. There's no one else that's doing that today. We have seen some traces of these things happening in some of the labs at Microsoft and others, but not in commercially. We are the only vendors that are doing the plan-based dialogue engine commercially.
Interesting. So is that something akin to something like Alexa Conversations, would you say, where the model itself is dictating where the conversation ought to go? Is that kind of the general gist or not? Or I misunderstood that?
Well, I have not had full experience with Amazon interactions much, but it depends on what they have trained it with, because I would suspect that unless you train it on the domain specific data of the enterprise in question, you won't be able to do this with generic stuff. So it's not like, in the case, like take one of the insurance companies that we work with. So they have this gadget insurance that they do across different countries. So depending on the country where you are offering this insurance product, see the claim process varies slightly. So this has to be grounded in the flow that is there in those documents. So you have to glean from those things and represent that knowledge, and then operate on that to provide your dialogue engine to the customer. So you can't do that generically, saying that, okay, I know insurance domain and I know what claim means, I know how to do that. And you can't really do that because you don't know what to ask next.
Right. Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah. I think the Alexa Conversations one is very much kind of like more of those horizontal use cases around like booking stuff and stuff like that, which is fine. But the business domain specific use cases is where the real kind of value is for most businesses.
They're all good for, obviously they're suited for the frame set dialogues. That is what you call as intent and slot models.
Yes.
So if you have intent and slot models, because then it will work. But in real life, as you know, in conversations, it is never going to be a specific intent and atomic value. The case point, like, if you are trying to schedule this meeting, you and I are not going to say that, okay, how about 11 a.m. tomorrow? We are going to say, when are you free next week? And you would say that any day is okay in the afternoons except Wednesday, or things like that. You would always give a constraint as opposed to an atomic value as an answer. So most of the intent slot models of the frame set dialogue systems would actually fail when you start giving that kind of a constraint.
Right. Very interesting. And so OpenStream then, so are you saying that OpenStream doesn't strictly use the kind of intent and entity based?
It
model?
Actually knows the semantic meaning of what has been said.
Right.
So, which is the reason why we have a portfolio strategy. Our NLE engine comprises of the semantic parser, multilingual semantic parser that we have, as well as the BERT model, which is the derivative that we have, which is patented in 3BERT model. So we use a combination of these things as a portfolio strategy, and then we use the context manager to determine which of those is the most appropriate answer for the dialogue engine to use to determine the next state and the next dialogue.
Right.
So
Very
that's
interesting.
the kind of approach that we do.
Yeah. That's interesting. So that requires quite a lot of really to understand at the semantic level. You need to really understand the domain that you're talking about, isn't it? So presumably you have a more domain focused. You have specific industries that you work with. Yeah.
About 4 or 5 industries where we have industry leading domain models. Insurance, financial services, healthcare, and some of the defense applications. For those things, we do have domain models. So we understand the variations thereof, and then of course you augment that with other data specific to that particular enterprise, and you have a very fine-tuned model with that, and so that you don't have to develop anything from scratch, and you can actually leverage that, and then our dialogue engine can reason it out from that point on as to what the user said. So this kind of helps in terms of handling negations and superlatives and things like that, which, as you probably know this very well. If you try that with any of your popular assistants on your phone, If I ask a question, show me restaurants nearby, but not Chinese or Korean, or things like that, it will eventually show you Chinese and Korean and not anything else. So it's like the ability to handle the negations and things like that is not present in some of the models that you have in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So when you have a semantic representation and we are doing semantic parser, it's an old idea, but we are using that with neural nets. So it's a neural net based semantic parser as opposed to language based, purely language based semantic parser like before, like grammar based systems. So in that sense, this has got the advantage of both the neural net type system, and then we get our knowledge store itself is independent of the language. So or even for that matter, domain actually. And then you can actually train this very quickly, make this available in different languages. So today that is how we are able to support some 45 plus languages and about 100 plus dialects around the world. And the key thing there is that how quickly can we make a new language available, and that is sensitive to the culture and the way they say it and all the stuff, including natural language generation. It's not just about understanding what the user is saying, but also how you generate the response. So we use the conventional model of logical forms, and then we train that with logical forms, and then we established a equivalence of the logical forms to get into the other language. So that is how we quickly are able to support other languages.
Very nice, very nice. The domain focus is really interesting because the more that we kind of explore, you know, getting really high accuracy out of a conversation. If an enterprise is handling, I don't know, 1 million conversations a month, then you could implement something that has something like a 50% accuracy rate, as in, like, you want to call it containment if you want, but like 50% of the conversations that the assistant has are successful ones. And that would be kind of good enough if 50% of them are escalated. If you've got that bot handling, I don't know, few thousand, 100,000 calls a month or so, that's really good. But you're still leaving a hell of a lot on the table. And so I'm assuming you're going to agree with this given the approach that you've taken, but having that domain specific focus and focusing around building a language model that truly understands insurance, for example, means that you're not dealing with these kind of like this suite of conversations is a 30% success rate. You're kind of dealing with a lot higher degrees of accuracy. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, because our clients don't accept anything less than 70 to 75% of automatic handling, because automation is the key. And then we guarantee a deflection rate of 75%. Typically, it's there on our website itself. I'm not trying to plug in all that stuff, but we guarantee that we achieve that. And
Yeah.
and that's you're absolutely right, because you can't. It's commendable what some of the large companies and the multi-billion-dollar investments into AI and conversational AI are achieving, but those are all good. But we are not there yet when it comes to enterprise level, enterprise grade applications in real life. It's not like finding who is the president of the country or how the weather is, or telling a story or a joke. I'm not trivializing that, because there is definitely a lot of progress that has been made, especially in generative languages, basically systems. But we are not there yet. There's a lot of hype around some of the things. I just don't want to name them, but you know what I'm talking about. So if you have 175 billion parameters, then you expect that you would be more accurate than anybody else. And recent studies have shown that the more you trigger, like you always say, the garbage in, garbage out. What kind of data that you have trained the system with? If you are really looking at 175 billion parameters, then probably you don't have that good a data to train the system with. So it's not the fault of the model that it's failing, but it's the fault of the data that you have to train. So the cost of training being prohibitive notwithstanding, even the performance is also suffering. In fact, there's one study that shows that it asks a question like, when you smash a mirror, what happens? And most of the models up to about 13 million parameters say that, okay, you smash it into small pieces, or and then one of them will start giving a definition at 7 million parameters or so. A mirror is something that that reflects light, and if you smash it, then you can't see your reflection. So it's almost like Wikipedia answer. But here is the interesting catch. When you go to 175 billion parameters, it says that you get 7 years of bad luck. So you know what it is feeding on. So you are essentially taking some garbage from some Wikipedia, some news article somewhere. In some cultures, they believe that if you break glass, then you have years of bad luck. So my point being that it's not like bigger is better always. Uh, it's about the quality of data that you use to train your models and how well they work. So it's in a way it's good, because that way the field is leveled uh,
Mm,
between the multi-billion-dollar investments and smaller players like us. With the approaches that our approaches are adequate, both from a cost perspective and also from accuracy perspective, for productivity gains. So that kind of gets you running, as opposed to spending $10 million to just train a model on your enterprise data.
that's a very good that's a very good point. Yeah. Everyone must have 7 years of bad luck, 'cause I'm sure everyone's smashed a mirror at some point in their life. I mean, that might be half of the problem that's wrong with all the stuff that's going on in the world. Everyone's smashing mirrors. But I've heard you've mentioned it a few times. Certainly at the top of the conversation, you were talking, about the term you were using often was assistance, and that's the term. You're talking about Phil Cohen and being there from the founding of or managing Adam Trier, which led to Siri and stuff like that, building the frameworks and stuff. And it's like that's the term that I tend to use quite a lot when describing these things is assistance, AI assistance, virtual assistants, things like that, digital assistants. There is some terminology that is used which is around bots. And I think that the bot terminology kind of comes from the chatbot space, where they're very just much just like pretty dumb button pushing things, whereas the assistant terminology tends to come more from the kind of Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant sort of space, where they are broad in terms of capabilities, and they're there to be genuinely assistive rather than kind of like narrow and focused and stuff like that. So I'm curious about what your sort of like where OpenStream plays now and where you think it will play in the future, because inevitably, in the Gartner report and stuff like that, OpenStream is in there because you're delivering on the enterprise. You're delivering enterprise use cases, presumably across call centers, large call centers, things like that. Yet the way the way that you describe it with the terminology sounds more akin to the kind of like Alexa on device ambient computing kind of model. So I'm curious about where you think or where you see OpenStream today versus where it's heading. Is it an enterprise automation AI company, or is it kind of voice AI capabilities that will stray into this more ambient computing world?
Well, that's an interesting observation, but let me first clarify that we are not just voice, we are multimodal.
Mm-hmm.
So we first of all take computer vision and speech and gesture and many other things to interpret the intent. So a lot of our referential expressions are not really all in voice. So you can actually have some of the things, I want this but not that, is something that I can gesture it and say. So that can also be interpreted by our system. But to your first part of the question, yes, the assist. Our product is called EVA, which stands for Enterprise Virtual Assistant. Our engineers will also call it as Embodied Virtual Assistant, because we also have an avatar and non-verbal behavior generation and a whole lot of other multimodal features. But EVA, because the differentiation that I would draw is that, like, we didn't play in the space of chatbots, so to speak, which are, at least in the industry, kind of change the meaning of the words. Chatbot actually could be your virtual assistant too, because it's just automating a lot of things. But most people use the word chatbot to infer that you are doing some FAQs and some mapping of intents to some static data, and then you're just repurposing that content. But that's not what the assistance is. Assistance means that you have the ability to think what the user has asked, and your answers are not readily available in a database or something where you can just look up and provide that. For example, if I were to ask you what is meant by out-of-pocket limit for a health insurance, so that is probably something that you can look up and any bot can provide you an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm asking a different question. Have I reached my out-of-pocket limit?
Mm.
So that is actually a composite question. So you have to first know what is out-of-pocket limit and what is Raj's out-of-pocket limit. And then you have to also know how much he has spent against the out of pocket limit for the year. That will be in a transactional database in a totally different system. And you have to decompose the utterance into multiple questions to different disparate systems, and then combine them and then generate an answer. And that I call as assistance, not just the way you said it, like Siri or something else, which will just, when you ask a question, it will throw you a bunch of URLs and shows you a response, and that's where it ends. And some of them may take a couple of more turns, but that still doesn't get them to qualify as assistants, if you will. I mean, again, people may disagree with me, but our own nomenclature is that um, users have something to accomplish, whether it is submitting a claim or getting a claim processed, or knowing a claim status, or trying to purchase a product, or searching for a product, whatever that they want to do. And those are the things that they should be able to perform. And we should be automating the process to assist them, and in trying to not make this whole thing chatty.
Mm.
You have to glean a lot of information from the environment, from the context, from whatever the person has been doing, so that every single thing doesn't have to be spelled out either by end user or by the developer. Again, we're mindful of what our developers are. In fact, if you look at it, developers are our customers, because end
Mm.
customers are their customers, right? So
Mhm.
if you have to really code, for example, there should be common beliefs in the system, mutual beliefs. Like, when you and I, if I just get a call and I turn my head away, that you should not ask a question, because that I'm distracted. So you are allowing me that courtesy of completing whatever interrupted me, and then resume your question later. Similarly, when I say something like, I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon, when I'm trying to schedule an appointment with you, then you implicitly understand that I can't make it, although I have
Mm.
not explicitly stated that. But then, how many of these things can you code for each utterance? So I could be saying I have a parent-teacher meeting, or I could be taking my like your son, taking him to the park, or for Easter egg hunting, or whatever. All those things mean that you can't do a podcast, you can't do your work. So that is kind of an implicit understanding that the society we have kind of developed, understood. So similarly, can we make these systems mimic the kind of social behavior that we have, where we understand implicitly that all these mutual beliefs of both the user and the system, in this case virtual assistant, are all at one place. And then all you are doing is that you are just mentioning or coding, if you will, enumerating the kind of beliefs in the system. And then the system's intentions are then available. And then kind of the system reasons out based on, when you say, I have a doctor's appointment, then the system reasons, oh, he has a doctor's appointment. That means he can't make this appointment. So I need to offer it a second alternative for him for some other time, day or time. So that is real assistance, and this is not something that your conventional, context unaware assistants can do.
That's very interesting. And what you just described there in terms of teaching the assistant these kind of fundamental social understandings, is that something? Are you talking aspirationally there? Are you talking about this is actually what OpenStream's capability does?
I can do a demo. I know it's a podcast, but I can do a demo of that system, where you can see how we code the beliefs and other things in the system, as opposed to coding every dialogue and every utterance of the end user, like in a scripted dialogue. You don't.
Right.
We are just stating. We are and coding the facts. We are codifying the knowledge, and allowing the system, and we are basically giving some sample set of questions, so that the system can understand how people ask those questions, and can get trained on such type of questions. And then after that, it tries to interpret the meaning of those questions, and then tries to figure out, based on the knowledge and the beliefs that the system has, and reasons it out. And that's the power of the plan-based dialogue engine
Wow.
I mentioned
That
about.
is that is very powerful.
That's what probably made us deserve the visionary thing. In fact, next, not to plug another event, but there's going to be a conversational interaction conference in San Jose on the 12th and 13th. Both Phil and I will be presenting there on some of these things, and we will be actually demonstrating that there to the people.
Wow. Well, I will look forward to. Hopefully, it's going to be available on Catch Up. I'll put the link down here, and I'll put it in the show notes. Conversational Interaction Conference. I know of a few people who are going to that actually, and so I'm hoping I can catch some of these talks and see that demo, because that would be very good. I mean, yeah. I think that's a really unique approach, and it definitely does explain how OpenStream is in that kind of visionary quarter, because it's not it's not conventional, and it takes more than intents and slots. It actually takes proper understanding of linguistics, and all that kind of stuff, which I think is really interesting. You kind of alluded just then, and you mentioned multimodal. We're definitely going to get onto that topic, so I'm really keen to kind of explore that. But you also mentioned about the assistant capability being something that is essentially helping someone get a job done, and it doesn't need to be kind of chit chatty kind of thing. I'm curious about your thoughts on the whole chit chat concept, because maybe it's 2017, 2018. Chatbots, people who are creating chatbots put a lot of effort into that kind of like, the little kind of like small talk and what's your name and are you a bot and stuff like that. Because I think users were trying to just like test it and stuff. I think we probably grew out of that a little bit now, but I wonder whether you can shed some light on what your thoughts are around the kind of small talk, chit chat, personality design.
That's a very good question, actually. While it may have started as, do you love me and things like that, the funny things that we all watched on Siri and on Big Bang Theory. But there are meaningful chit chats that you could do. For example, when you're trying to schedule an appointment, in our case, and I often do this as part of our demo. The person might ask, after you have scheduled the appointment for them to come, the guy is going to ask, how is the weather going to be on that day? Which is a totally different question, not in line of whatever your workflow is. So meaning that if it's going to snow, or if it's going to be raining heavily or something like that, then the guy probably can't make the appointment. So that correlation is something the dialogue engine must establish. So it's not really a chit chat, but it is a digression. It is a digression from the flow of your conversation, but you're coming back to it because you're seeing what is the relevance of that to the current conversation. And that is where the dialogue engine has to be smart. So this is the kind of chit chat that we do. We provide other services like how is the weather going to be on that day, and or it's you can simply say there are a lot of ways, like people say that you can express a particular intent. The boundary conditions are always going to be there. Those things have to be explicitly coded. The system can't reason it out. If I just say it's hot in here, or simply I don't like text messages at lunchtime, am I giving an implicit instruction to block text messages, or am I just stating my preference as to what it is that I want to do? So those are difficult to interpret, but you have to really do that based on the context and based on the use case. You have to take one decision or the other.
Interesting. Talk us through the multimodal side of things as well, then, because you mentioned, so Eva is also the name of the avatar that you created, digital avatar. Is that true?
The digital assistant is called Eva, so is the platform. Yes.
So where does the digital avatar appear? How would someone interact with that? Is this a website thing? Is this like a hologram kind of in-person thing? How does that side of things work?
It's a physical avatar. So if you have a mobile app or something like that, it has an avatar that appears, and you can actually converse with it using speech or whatever else that you choose. So the case in point is multimodal is that, let's say you're trying to submit a claim for an insurance auto accident. So it asks you for the VIN number or vehicle identification number. So how do you give the vehicle identification number? That will be a 16-digit number or 17-digit number, and you can't enter that in the text field of a mobile phone. You can actually take that and make that as a camera and then point it out to the windshield of your car, and it picks it up from there. Or you can just read it out aloud. And then it asks you for your odometer reading and things like that. Then you can just point your camera Same, the assistant, you point that to your odometer reading, and then it kind of does an OCR, takes that picture, and automatically populates that. So all these things are going to reduce the errors and also make it very, very fast and quick to submit a claim. So the whole process of submission of claim will be so fluid that it's so easy to do it,
Mm.
as opposed to making it chatty, like, okay, tell me what is your vehicle identification number. I have to
Mm.
read type that out, and then I have to read what is there on the odometer and enter that information. And then you might ask, take these pictures of your car around that and show me where the damage has happened. So
Mm.
oftentimes what happens is, once you take the pictures and you submit all those things, and the insurance company comes back and tells you, hey, the picture was blurry, or it was low light, or we couldn't see the damage, and therefore it again becomes iterative. So that's
Mm.
that's what you mean by chatty. You don't want to be asking all these questions again and again while you are taking the picture itself. The edge AI eva can do, if it is blurry, it'll automatically detect the blur, or it will automatically detect a low light, and it will tell you, hey, you know what, take that again,
Mm.
the picture again. And when you submit, you have an ability to annotate and say, this is where the windshield is damaged, as you can see here. And then with annotation, you can speak also at the same time. So it's a multimodal annotation. So now you can see how this can be useful in different scenarios. From a technology paradigm perspective, all you are doing is you are taking some image and you're scribbling something on top of it. You're probably highlighting some region of interest, and
Mm.
you're also speaking what it is that you're doing. While you're doing that, you're qualifying what you're doing there. So it could be, so a diagnostic report that some doctor is kind of highlighting, trying to get a second opinion and collaborate with their colleagues. Or it could be a legal document that your colleagues are all reviewing a contract, saying that, this clause doesn't look okay. Can you change this clause? And then
Mm.
you're kind of annotating. So there's no ambiguity about what you're referring to. It makes it that much easier for people to really convey what they're trying to convey. Because I don't have to say that on page 14, section 2 is where I need you to change the verbiage, as opposed to, here it is. As I open it, you see clearly what I said, and then you can actually automatically place it out. So that's
Mm.
what I mean by multimodal. Of course, there are tons of other applications. You could, for example, if oftentimes it happens that I need to pick up something on the way home, so I can't use location services of anything. I want to see, because I'm going by this highway, and I want to see, are there any shops that sell this in this area?
Mm.
I want to mark that, and that is not defined by a zip code or a pin code or a postal code. That is not by a town name. That is by an area that I have chosen arbitrarily based on what path I'm going to take on that day. And then I should be able to circle that or draw a line and say, show me where I can buy in this path.
Mm.
So that is a multimodal intent that you're conveying, where you're asking a question through the speech, and then you're also gesturing on the screen at the same time. These two are processed in conjunction to interpret your intent. So I could just be asking anything. Show me the pharmacies that are open here which have COVID test kits available in this area.
Mm.
Not where I am. I'm not asking for where at my workplace. I want to specifically ask where I want. This is a everyday requirement for most of us.
Mm. Mm.
We're not looking at spending more time near the office.
Interesting. So it's really interesting, this, because it's kind of making me think that on the one hand you've got like that kind of use case that you described there, the car kind of use case. Let's say that it's a as you said, you're making a claim, or you want to get your windscreen fixed or whatever. That makes sense from a point of view of, like, let's say like an auto glass or an insurance company would have that use case. You go into the app, you go through the app, it's conversational, you can talk to it, you can take pictures, that kind of stuff. But then you start talking about kind of like, you're driving home and you should be able to circle something on a map and say, show me petrol stations here or whatever. That kind of leads me to think about, like, the my Hey Mercedes, or the BMW assistant in vehicle. And then also, circulating the map and saying stuff like, show me pharmacies where COVID tests are available. That kind of leads me to think about this being something that can operate at more of an operating system level, like the kind of capability you would expect something like Apple to have in their maps capability, and the use case around the insurance seems to be something that would go really nicely hand in hand with like a UJet contact center solution or something like that. So it's almost like, you know, I don't exactly know what I'm trying to say. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that from hearing you describe the technology and hearing you describe the kind of use cases, it seems to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the OpenStream technology could be used in a industry specific, omni-channel customer service situation, could be used potentially alongside a UCAS solution or CCAS solution,
Yes.
to enable kind of like wider transformation. But then at the same time, it could potentially be used on device or at an operating system level to
Yes.
enable horizontal kind of capabilities. It's like where does it end?
No, you're right, because when we started originally, none of these things existed in the marketplace. And as you said, slowly things have started happening. For example, we have a feature called set focus. If you see Apple today, you have the focus feature and all those things. So those are
Mm,
some of the things that are patented by us. It's slightly different, their focus operation is different from our focus operation. But these are things that, our requirement is our users are mobile, and they could be stationary, and they could be anywhere. And so we need to work on whatever we meet customers on their preferred channel, their preferred devices. So we need to work on, as part of the mobile app, as part of the telephone channel, as part of the social messenger, you name it. So therefore, if you have a UCAS provider, of course we work with UCAS providers. We integrate with some of their agent desktops. We provide the context of interaction completely before we transfer, when we transfer to them, so that they have the full information. And then we'll probably also facilitate a transfer back to us. So oftentimes it happens, as you know, when you see a doctor, the doctor sees you, and before you see the doctor, somebody else collects all the information about you.
mm,
They prepare you for everything. And then the doctor's time is precious. Likewise, a human agent is precious. So you just only use them for their expertise. And then when you ask, okay, doctor, when do you want me to come and see you? He said, go to the front desk and they'll schedule an appointment for you. So that means that is not a task that I need to be doing for you, and my assistant will do that. So that means you can actually transfer from a human to the assistant again, and then
ah,
resume the conversation from that point on. So that is kind of prevalent in most of our deployments, where we do the transfer from the assistant to the human, as well as from the human to the assistant. So really, that's where the differentiation comes. And it's not like we can stop at one place. We have to. Some people say that, okay, it's not like I have everything when I have network and connectivity, and I have nothing if I don't have any connectivity. That's not going to work for us, because people want to review things and people want to interact with the system even when they're offline. So therefore, we had to build some of the things like models on the edge, so that you train the models on the cloud, and then you load the models on the edge, and you're able to run them even if you don't have connectivity to the network. But then, of course, you do publish the next model and next things, and based on part of your reinforcement learning that happens.
mm,
That's something that you push to all the edge devices.
mm, mm,
That is why you see that, where are we, because the world is divided. Once the conversational AI has become fashionable to talk about, people have put that into silos, like saying that, okay, I am this guy, I am the UCAS provider. Of course, that is also blurring now. As you can see, most of the contact center providers have started offering some kinds of bots. And then people who stayed on the pure play in natural language understanding and speech technology have started entering to, like Google CCAI, for example,
mm,
and many of these guys have started coming into that space. So it's blurring now, but you see where we are going with it, because we are not a generic provider of a logistic regression model on the cloud. We have to work across. We work better when there is full connectivity.
mhm.
You're not cut off from the whole thing because you don't have connectivity. That's
Yeah.
the important thing for us.
Yeah, you're right there that the lines are blurring. I mean, I've always seen, because we started this whole journey with VUX World started in the kind of voice assistant space, looking at your likes of Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant and all of those things, and then that kind of led into independent voice assistants and edge computing for speech recognition and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually it kind of tracks into kind of like the more kind of natural language based stuff that's not specifically voice, so like chatbots and messaging bots and stuff like that. And then when you start looking at that, you start looking at the enterprise, you start looking at the call center, and all of a sudden all of these technologies, which is fundamentally all the exact same technology, is horizontal capability, isn't it? It can run on it can run on a mobile device or a desktop or a laptop or inside an app or on a device or in a call center. It doesn't really matter where it is. You still need the same capabilities, and that's kind of the view we've always had: is that this technology is horizontal capability, and it can be applied everywhere. Whereas some companies who are contact center companies view themselves as kind of like contact center automation with AI. Some who are more kind of on the digital end view themselves as chatbot builders, sort of thing, and some on the voice assistant end see themselves as voice marketers or something like that. So there's fragments kind of appearing, but it's all basically the exact same stuff. So having that approach of building the core capabilities really well that can then be applied to wherever they can be applied, I think is a really sensible thing, because you're not pigeonholed to any one industry or use case or channel, you know?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you have the capabilities, your customer journey dictates what faculties you want to employ for a particular solution. So, what is the customer trying to do? What are the things that because oftentimes we have the interaction happen through more than one touch point. So, you have seen obviously the cable modem guys and some of the cable companies trying to offer customer support service. I don't know what is RJ45 and which of these slots that I should plug that into. Then you need to see what the person is seeing, and through the camera simultaneously you're watching. You could be holding one device for this and the another device that is showing the camera, or it could all be in one device, as the case may be. So you have a group of devices that you can employ as part of your workflow interaction. Some of the nurses that go and offer the patient care, they have a lot of healthcare HDP profile devices like measuring instruments. So they can just say, once they measure BP or whatever, they can just say, okay, read that into this, and then the whole thing comes into your device, and once you measure it, because it knows of the presence of other devices in the vicinity, and it knows how to connect to those things, and it is aware of the fact that there are other devices, the discoverable, that are going to be paired now. And this also can apply to your core capabilities. In fact, I've written a spec on this at W3C on discoverability and of the capabilities. So, for example, my assistant today, let's say, my mortgage, like what happens when you go to a bank and you have a concierge person that kind of tries to address your needs, and then they try to get the other person to come and help you with a financial advice or mortgage or anything else, because those people are subject matter experts. But when you ask, what kind of home can I afford and things like that, and if I don't find the mortgage guy available that day, he'll say that, sorry, today he's not available. But if the person is available, okay, let me get that for you. And that's what you say. That means you have, as a concierge bot or a master bot or a master assistant, have the ability to see what other faculties that you have that you can employ as part of your solution. And for that, you need a capability for registration of such capabilities and discoverability of such capabilities. For example, language translation is another example. Somebody is asking, okay, do I have a Spanish translation of this or Chinese translation of this? So can you interpret this? I may have entire thing in English, but then suddenly, if you want that, I have another ASR engine that is already model that is available. Then all that I need to do is to siphon out your audio stream to that, and because I have that available, and the rest of the logic and other things flow in the same way. So these are things that we can discover. Some of these faculties we can bring in dynamically into the mix, and then provide that kind of facility to the end user.
I've heard that that's how kind of Alexa is architected, around that kind of concierge bot, where the utterance comes in and it almost like feeds it through to a bunch of kind of sub bots, which says, okay, who can answer this to the greatest degree of confidence? Is that where you see kind of like the enterprise voice assistants and AI assistants in general heading?
it will be like that eventually, because see, if you see this, you're not going to have, there is an app for that, there is an app for this, app needs to save it. Now we have app explosion. Same thing, it's going to have bot explosion for every small function. If you start writing the bots that way, let there be one interface. You need to have something that people know how to interact with. And then, like, that's how it happens when you physically go, and the person will recognize you. And if they already recognize you, they only ask you for secondary identification when you're performing a high value transaction. Otherwise, you can actually start engaging in a conversation. They don't ask you for ID proof or anything like that. So the same thing should happen with the virtual assistants also, because they should know you once you walk into a restaurant. If every day, if you walk into your neighborhood restaurant in UK, the guy recognizes you and says, okay, he gets your coffee the way you want it. It's the same thing. It's the usual stuff. It just gives you a nod saying that it's the same order or not. In a small nod, you're conveying so much of meaning, which brings us to this next point that I'm trying to make, which is multimodal analysis, because you're missing out on the whole point if you're trying to do a lot of sentiment analysis on the text. First of all, I think some of your earlier speakers talked about if you lose the original voice signal, then you lost 50% of your ability to glean anything from it, because you already got the text. So you don't know what is the emotion with which somebody said. This simple sentence like, I don't think he should get a job, can be said in 14 different ways to mean totally different things. So depending on where you lay emphasis. So all that tonal stuff gives you a lot of information, and that also helps you in analytics. That is on just the tone alone. But then I really like it. I can say, and rolling my eyes. So if you miss that and you only heard this, you probably think I really like it. So the real life communication is not, just like how there are no, when we are trying to study science, we try to study them as electricity, magnetism, and mechanical forces and things like that. But in real, because that's easy for us to understand and grasp and get our head around them. But in real life, there is nothing called a pure magnetic force or a pure electric force or a pure mechanical force. You have a combination of all those things. One cannot be separated from the other. In a similar way, here also, if you are building this virtual assistant and communication is not unimodal. Because we couldn't do all these things, the technology did not exist. We were struggling with acoustic models that would work across, noisy environments, and the speech recognition until 2012, was not so good. Today in New York, you don't have, UK English, US English, and some other English. You have people that speak 150 languages in Manhattan and surroundings, New York metro area. So if you're offering a brokerage solution or an insurance company solution as a bot, as that can take any kind of modality, as the speech and other stuff, you should be prepared for 150 different accents. And it has to work across those things. And today we have achieved that, thanks to deep learning, right? So we at least cracked the speech recognition portion of it. At least today, it's pretty good. In fact, even with my accent and everyone's accent, today I have laryngitis, but even with this kind of tone, I can still make my system understand me well. My point being that the conversation must happen in the same way that you and I talk. So like this, because I can say simply, if I get distracted, you should know immediately that I'm distracted, and you pause. You don't keep speaking. So if you are blind, only then that happens that way. So and then it is much easier for me to, let's say you're presenting me a graph, and I would like to say, why is this high? Is something that I can gesture at that and ask. So I think one of your earlier speakers talked about this also, because you need to have a representation of what it is in the visual modality in order for your speech modality to clearly be understood, by your dialogue engine as to what you're referring to. And I need to have an grasp of whatever is represented there. For example, I think it's one of your TV guys that talked about it. I think Disruptel or somebody.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So those concepts, so the TV doesn't know what it is displaying. So when you ask, do you want to do Google Lens or Amazon Lens or whatever, you can do object recognition and other stuff. But from your side, but the system also should understand what it is displaying.
Mm.
So, and in fact, Professor Wallister at DFKI in Germany always says that you cannot do anything without having the representation. So each of those things have to be represented properly with a proper markup language, so you understand what is being displayed there. So when I ask, say like simple, even in the shopping experience, I mean we are focused on enterprise, but you can also go for the commerce. I would like this in red color in XXL.
Mm.
So I am just asking, and what this indicates is a Ralph Lauren polo shirt, right?
Mm.
I'm specifying some other attributes about that. So that is something that I should be able to do, because that makes it a lot easier, because it doesn't make it whole thing chatty, and then you can quickly convey your intent. Because we have shown that in the field, in fact, we published on this one also about there is 30 to 40% reduction in the processing time for completing any task if you employ multimodal techniques.
Wow.
So because
30 to 40%.
30 to 40% reduction.
Wow.
And we can demonstrate that in field force automation, everything, so because you are employing multimodal techniques,
Mm.
this and that, so you convey that quickly. Even for software bug reporting in our office, when we have something on the screen, it's very difficult to tell people what I'm seeing. Then they'll ask, okay, I'm not able to reproduce this error. I'm not able to do that. And I have to take screenshot and send an email with writing. No, I just, as part of our applications, every one of our applications is capable of capturing the ink annotation and speech and everything else. You can actually capture that and say, this is the bug that I see. This font is not aligned. So there is no ambiguity. There's no, nobody can deny that has happened, because that is available to you. So we
Wow.
have multitude of applications like this, where we are able to employ this multimodal technology to cut short the amount of time that you need to convey your intent or to resolve something. As they say, the first time user experience is so important. The first time resolution is so important. The semantic interpretation, because it can't be that I throw some 5 alternatives at you and then let you choose. So that's not. We've gone past that. We've graduated from those things. I mean, we did do those things 10, 15 years back. But today we don't do those things anymore, because we know how to glean from the utterance what probably the user meant.
Mm. Interesting. That is so interesting. The whole kind of multimodal thing is really interesting because, like, as you begin to put this technology into new spaces and you wrap new use cases around it, the mental model of a user, I reckon, will change, which is why it becomes more important to have that multimodal side of things. So, for example, if I'm just on a website and I've got a chatbot and it's just a chatbot and all I can do is talk to it, I'm kind of going to understand in my mental model the kind of things it's likely to be able to do, because I've used one before and I know to be really short on my descriptions and stuff like that. Whereas if you take a voice assistant and that windscreen repair example that you're talking about, you open your camera and you can point to something or annotate something, it kind of the mental model of the user at that time is totally different, and they might just naturally come up with things and say things that you would not usually predict. Things like, what's that, or where's this, or in that TV example with Disrupted, it's like, who's the guy on the left? Like, you wouldn't be able to really predict that someone's going to say, who's the guy on the left, because you've
Yes,
never really had that technology in that environment, in that context before. So it's really interesting how the new context creates new requirements.
absolutely. The classic. In fact, I tell my colleagues that I mean, not to flatter you on your podcast, but your podcasts are probably good enough for a novice to start and
Mm.
become a kind of an expert what
Thank you.
conversation is all about. So the case in point, one of your earlier speakers also talked about that. Um, so if you see the before iPhone and after iPhone that people talk about, likewise I say before iPad and after iPad. So if we take my daughter, is not trained on any of these things. She goes on the iPad and she pinches and zooms, because that is natural to make something big, to say make something small. And then you give her a mouse as a technology guy, and then the screen and something, where it doesn't do that. So she starts crying. In fact, we gave her a magazine, and then she looked at the picture. She thinks that everything is picture and text. So she tries to do that on the magazine, and it doesn't become big. And then she starts crying, as to why it's not working. So it's the same thing. In fact, most of our enterprise users today, there are some applications that don't change with the orientation of the device. When you change that to portrait to landscape and things like that, if the application doesn't change, they think that it's not working. Because, as you said, the new faculties, new paradigms, new interfaces that are getting closer and closer to the natural way that we all interact. Once people get used to those things, anything else is really an exception, and the blocking thing for them from your system.
Interesting. That is really good. Well, Raj, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a whirlwind. I feel as though, I always feel as though I learn things on these podcasts, but every now and then one comes along where you just feel as though you've kind of feel as though you've learned a load, but then at the same time, you start to feel as though you really don't understand things as much because there's a lot more to it. It's that typical kind of learning journey where you kind of learn a bit and you get confident, and then you realize you scratch the surface and there's just far more underneath it. And so I'm loving this conversation about where this technology is going, because as soon as you break out of pure language and you break into different modalities, you all of a sudden understand and start to realize that the kind of use cases that become available, plus the kind of technology that you need, plus the kind of promise of all of this technology is to help people get stuff done, get out of the way, basically get the technology out of the way of the experience and just let people naturally get on with whatever they need to do. And so I think sometimes we can get really bogged down in the kind of speech and language part of it and forget that it's all happening within the world that people exist within, and the devices and technology that they use going about their daily lives needs to be the thing that bends in order to make them do whatever it is they need to do wherever they are.
Talk to my colleague Stefan, a good friend of mine from USC ICT, their Moxie, for example.
Oh, yes.
So that's an example of what it is that we could do with multimodal things, whether it comes to social and emotional learning for kids. These are all great examples of multimodal technology. And since you said we have been sponsoring the international conference, ACM International Conference on Multimodal Interaction, for the last 12 years or so, every year as a platinum sponsor. That is because we want to closely monitor where this technology is headed, and we're fortunate to have some of the leading professors in the space, like Professor Stacy Marcella, again, a lot of people from University of Southern California ICT. All of them advising us and collaborating with us in building the next version of the greatest virtual assistants that we could.
Nice. Wicked. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. Do visit OpenStream.ai. The link to that will be in the show notes. It will be on the website, and it will be in all of the places where you get your podcasts. So thank you for tuning in. I'm on holiday next week, but I will be back next Thursday, where we'll be talking to Sensory AI about edge-based computing, which we kind of touched a little bit on today. So we'll be building on that.
A great friend of ours. Yes.
Todd Moser. He's going to be on the show. So looking forward to that. Cool. Raj, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so